Right.
Hello, friends. I'm back here with my friend John C. Bavona. John is a third-time guest on Theology in a Raw. That puts you in a really elite class. A lot of you guys know who John is if you've been listening to this podcast, at least for the last few months. He's been on a couple of times in the last few months. So, John, why don't we start? Just give us your credentials, and then we can jump into talking about the scientific data behind masks.
Yeah, sure. So I work for the University of Chicago. I work in a high containment facility. It's called the Howard T. Ricketts Laboratory. It's a biosafety level 3 facility. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
We work with high consequence pathogens. So those are pathogens that are known to be potential for pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So COVID and the SARS virus fits right in there. So really my main job is I work out at this biosafety level 3 facility, and I do a lot of training, risk assessment in regards to, agent specific or pathogen specific, how it's transmitted, the incubation period, how stable is it in the environment, how can you kill it, how long does it last in the environment, stuff like that. Stuff that I've been doing for 20 years, and now it's almost mainstream now, with people kind of understanding the terms. And so that's really the main thrust of what I do. I've been with the University of Chicago for 20 years. So coming up on my anniversary in October. So,
wow.
So that is really the thrust of what I do. In the past, I've been involved in some really cool initiatives, really nationwide. So if people remember Ebola outbreaks, I really love the University of Chicago and really the city of Chicago. God really put me in a really cool position just because of the background of working in a high containment lab. How to train clinical care workers on how to deal with respiratory pathogens that are transmitted by droplets and aerosols.
So if you're listening or watching, I will say it because John won't say it, but John knows more than you do about masks. I'm just trying to stir things up, man. So
I know.
All right, so give us. I mean, so in each episode we've addressed this, but I know that opinions keep shifting. Even some of the experts, have said different things. I think there's some level of distrust and suspicion now among a lot of parts of the population, at least. All the way from like this whole COVID thing doesn't exist, it's made up, all the way to we're all going to die, let's just start digging our own graves, and everything in between. Let's just start with masks. So there's been differences of opinion. I mean, I remember reading back in January that the WHO said they don't do anything. Surgeon General has a tweet out in February telling people stop buying masks. The medical I think he was saying like don't buy N95 masks because the medical professionals need it. But there has been kind of some variations. So give us your professional, I wouldn't even say opinion, professional perspective on whether or not masks should be worn and whether or not they're effective and helpful.
Yeah, so much there. Where do I start? So. Just starting in the very beginning, I think public health in a lot of different areas with this pandemic really hasn't hit the mark a lot, especially on masks, where they've said things that could be misinterpreted by people who don't understand, masks and what they do. So yeah, I get that. If I am just the regular person that doesn't work with personal protective equipment and masks and how they work, and I see kind of how this went from, even Fauci came out early on and he said that don't wear masks, and the reason he said it, he wasn't transparent. Obviously, he said it because he wanted to, make sure that the healthcare professionals had N95s and surgical masks. So. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I understand the logic of why he said it, So obviously when you have the guy that's leading, do a 180, distrust. Surgeon General came out and said, don't wear masks. Now what he was doing was, this was before he came out and said, hey, you don't need a mask. And this was before what we knew about asymptomatic transmission, meaning that you can have zero symptoms and transmit it. So now it's like 40%, right, Preston? Between 25 and 40% of people don't have any symptoms and can transmit it. Mm-hmm. So obviously, if you wanted to be really, not nitpicky, but, if you were kind of honest about it, and you didn't have a horse in the game, yeah, he dropped the ball too. So there's no doubt that there has been. And then obviously this is so political, right? So people will take that and run with it, and misinformation starts on the right and the left. But even bigger picture is that a lot of times scientists and public health, well, they really know a language inside the laboratory, but when they get in front of a mic and they have to speak in front of people that speak a different language, there's a lot that's lost in translation. Okay. And I have been in this 20 years, and I've seen principal investigators, what we call them, get in front of audience, and I think purposefully they speak a different language just to say, hey, I'm way up here. I'm in the ivory tower. That's what we say at the University of Chicago, the ivory tower. These are the people that, set all the laws and regulations in general. So I think part of that is, there's an intent to just say, hey, I'm better than you. And a lot of times if people don't understand, they don't ask the question. But they've done a poor job in general, not everybody, of explaining the pathogen, of even explaining how novel it is, right? I think people that are in my field in biosafety, they really are the experts when it comes to the pathogen and how it works and how you can stop it. And if it's new, how it changes. I mean, if you look at some of my interviews that I've done from the beginning, I'm really thankful to God that's put me in this situation, but there hasn't been too much that I've changed. And that's been en masse, where their national leaders I've seen have changed. I've seen people that don't have any experience in personal protective equipment en masse say they don't work. Yeah. And even there's a disconnect between, and they'll use it for political gain. Let me try to just kind of explain this in the right way, where they're answering a question that's not asked. So I've seen people on the right say masks don't work. They don't eliminate the virus. And then I've seen people on the left, they say masks are the be end all. They're going to do, they're going to stop everything, prevention, and both are wrong. I think what is science that has been proven over years of people wearing surgical masks. When you have a surgeon operating over you, they wear a surgical mask. The reason they wear a surgical mask is so their droplets are reduced so they don't fall in when you have a chest wide open, right? When you go to a dentist's office and you have the dentist wearing the surgical mask, that's so their droplets don't go into your mucous membranes. So it's not new, but I think overall it's really been a poor job of explaining masks. Even it's really settled that if you're saying the right thing, masks, it's settled science that they reduce transmission. They do not eliminate your exposure. They reduce it. When I work with, and there's been a huge confusion about respirators and masks, and people that are on TV that are speaking like experts have no idea what a respirator, the difference between a respirator. This is early on, still sometimes they don't know the difference between a respirator and a mask, the limitations. So it's really been a poor job, I think, from the top trying to explain that. And that's what I've been doing for 20 years. I do respirator fit tests. I train on the respiratory program. I know everything about it. I'm still learning, obviously, but what we do with respirators is we do quantitative and qualitative fit tests. So quantitative is a number. So if I wear a respirator, I think you guys can see that. Yeah. So before I can wear it, if I'm a medical professional and I work in a lab, I put this on, and there's a test to quantitative tell the difference between what's outside and what's inside. It counts. It counts the number. So that's quantitative. Qualitative is like a smell or a taste. So I put my respirator on. First they'll spray like a banana oil or a sugar in my mouth. Hey, can you taste this, John? Yes. Then I put my respirator on. They spray that same aerosol. Now can you smell it? Can you taste it? So that's a qualitative fit test. And those have been for years and years. They've been the standard, the OSHA standard for that. And for masks, you can do it like a do-it-yourself, qualitative fit test where you can put on a mask and you can sneeze in a mirror with a mask, and you can sneeze in a mirror without a mask. You can do the candle where you put a candle, you can try to blow out a candle with a mask, without a mask. And it's settled science that it reduces, it doesn't eliminate.
Okay.
What I'm gonna just walk through people, just a really quick study, and I'm gonna send you some slides. Maybe you can kind of plug this in.
Okay.
But so after the Ebola outbreak, I had the opportunity to work with the Duke Infectious Disease Response Training. That was really a nationwide adventure, a nationwide training that went out throughout the United States, and we trained people on basically what we do for emergency responders, clinical care workers, stuff like that. So this is from the Duke University, and it's been published in Science Advances, and it's kind of like something that you can do at home if you have the technology. But what they did is they took all the different masks, from an N95 to a surgical mask to a cloth mask to a fleece, the bandana. They did it all. And what they did is they had 4 people speaking. They did a proof of principle, so they did it 10 times for each mask. And what they had lasers, and then they had a camera showing droplets. So they did a normal where someone was just talking, and you saw the droplets, and they could count it. And then they put the 14 different masks on, and they showed the reduction. So I'm going to send you. So what they did, there's 14 different, obviously a surgical mask, a valved N95. So you have the N95 with the valve on. They did, a cotton, 4 different types of cottons, but bandanas, fleeces, propylene, cotton masks, different layers. So they did all 14. So what they showed is a really cool graph, but if you see like a standard of 1 was people talking without a mask. And then they did all 14 of these masks, and 13 of them reduced it by at least 50%. Wow. The N95 was at 0. Surgical mask was close to 0, but everything, the cotton swab. The only one, and this is really kind of cool, is that, those fleece masks that the athletes wear, so they start with the neck, and it's really stretchy. So that actually increased the droplets, because what happened was you had these larger droplets when they were talking, and when they went through the fleece, they actually separated into more droplets. Oh, God. So that was above 1. So if you think of 1 was talking without a mask, everything was at least 50%, reduced it by 50%, except for this fleece, this fleece mask. So that's kind of how we got here. But I think kind of even the disconnect, and it comes from both political sides. I even seen people on the left making it, if you don't wear a mask, you're killing people, all over, which I think that's disingenuous, because it does reduce, but it doesn't eliminate.
And it's I know early on people would say it doesn't help you contract it as much as give it. Is that still where we're at? That it's
important term, as much. So obviously, if I wear a mask, I am doing much more protection for my neighbor than for me. But I am still reducing my exposure. Remember, the key word is reduction. It's not elimination, right? But it reduces a lot more for my neighbor than for myself. The bigger droplets, obviously, if my neighbor, spits, coughs, talks, it's going to reduce the larger droplets, but for me.
So I remember the first time we talked, you helped me understand the difference between aerosols and droplets. So it makes, this just seems like basic, not even science, just common sense. Like if you have something over your mouth and you sneeze, that stuff that you can see coming out of your mouth will be reduced. But what about aerosols, just breathing? Because you're still, if I have like a handkerchief or something, you see people with handkerchiefs, and I'm like, I don't know, is that really reducing the aerosols coming through? And is COVID spread through aerosols? Has that been pretty settled?
So I think it's settled that it can be aerosolized. We talk whether it's the degree of it being transmitted by aerosol is still kind of to be determined, right? Okay. We do know it can be aerosolized. There has been studies, people in restaurants where it's been aerosolized. They're doing all these studies now, with the air conditioning on, with the air conditioning off. Does air conditioning make it more stable in the environment, stuff like that? So It's settled that we know droplets for sure is the main route of transmission. Aerosol is still to be determined.
Oh, okay.
I think it is, but the degree, there was some pressure maybe a month ago from a lot of these different scientists saying, hey, WHO and CDC, you need to come out and say that it can be aerosol transmission.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't. Even early on, University of Chicago, we have agent profiles, and we say possible.
Okay.
So I think it's possible. I think out of every 100 people that are transmitted, maybe one, less than one. So it's possible, but it's much more probable with droplets. But the other question is, if you just have a mask, any of those 15 masks, those aren't going to stop. Like this is a surgical mask, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to do anything for aerosols.
It's
a
not.
Respirator will, right? It will not, right? Because aerosols are smaller and they're going to go right through this. The droplets, the micro droplets, will be stopped by this, but the respirator is what stops not only the droplets but the aerosols. Those are the really fine, the ones that work in gravity, or I think less than 5 microns, and they'll go right through masks. Really, especially the finer ones, whereas the N95s, they'll stop droplets and aerosols. But remember, if you wear a respirator, that's why the big push was for healthcare workers, because they do procedures that aerosolize. When you're doing intubation, you do some procedures where you take a droplet and you just pretty much jam stuff in a mucous membrane, and it sprays and it becomes aerosols. So that's why it's really important, because most of us are not exposed to aerosols. It's possible, but it's much higher likely when you're doing procedures that aerosolize it.
So just wearing a bandana in the store, if no one is shooting droplets at each other, if it's just walking past, breathing the same air within a few feet, that's not gonna do much or anything with just strictly aerosols?
No, very few. Okay. I mean, even when you see this graph from Duke, the bandana is actually outside of the fleece, which is actually worse than not wearing anything. The bandana is at about 50% reduction.
Okay.
And then everything else is the majority is less than 20% or 80% reduction.
I don't see people talk, because I feel like early on it was, people kind of mocking each other for wearing these just bandanas, whatever. Like, look, if you're going to get a real mask, that might help, but just putting something over your mouth isn't going to. But now I don't see that conversation happening as much in the public, like the actual quality of thing you're putting around your mouth. I know a lot of restaurants here, they'll have stacks of masks. If you don't have one, well, I mean, now it's you're required to, but they'll still hand out. But some of these are so cheap and flimsy, and is this really doing? Is it just the symbolism of it, or do you not know that this isn't really gonna?
Yeah, I think outside of fleece, everything else reduces it.
Okay.
Right? Fleece, it's funny that all the athletes. Funny, you watch a baseball game or something like that, or these coaches just watch it. I don't know if they're just doing it so people don't see their face when they're talking, to hide the signals, right? I don't know. But yeah, what they found out is that actually increases what comes out of your mouth, which is pretty cool.
What about the whole why are some Christians anti-mask? I mean, some Christians believe in a flat earth, so I get that, but it seems like, help me understand. Is it because Trump for so long seemed to be kind of anti-mask or didn't wear one, and a lot of hyper Trump supporters in the Christian community, or why? I don't understand if it has been shown clearly scientifically to reduce, especially if everybody wore one, especially inside. Why? What's the counter argument? What am I missing here? Is there some study that has been published that says they don't do anything well,
early on, yeah. So early on, I think you saw some. So I don't know the term. What is it called? Confirmation bias, right? Yeah. Where you have a bias. Hey, I think this works. And then you see one study that confirms it. So you put it on Facebook, and see, this is wrong. And yeah, I think so. It's funny that our church is now Indiana is mandatory masks out. When you're out in stores, and schools are starting soon, so you have to wear a mask. And our church, our pastor does a great job to say, hey, we want you wearing masks, when you're walking in, when you're walking out. We have stuff, distanced, when you sit down. But Preston, I bet there's still a good percentage. the percentage at Walmart, at stores, at schools is probably less than 10%, but it's higher in churches. And I don't get that, I mean, it makes me sad. It really does. That I even remember sending an email to someone in the church, and I said, this is after Indiana mandated it because it saves lives. And it's true, it's not 100%, but, in the Christian virtues of your neighbor and considering others better and laying down your life, it really makes me sad. I don't understand. And sometimes it's just with a boldness too. People walk in and they're like, "You're darn right, I don't have a mask." And I don't see that in scripture anywhere. And it's just, it hurts, it's like, gosh. And they have me, I feel like you guys have, not to get on a high horse, but I've given, the church really a lot of good information, and it's not everybody, but it's, I don't know what it's a reflection of, but I do know in general, right wing, and, I don't think Trump has been the best proponent of it, obviously. And, people, there's some Christians, if you have the whole spectrum, that love Jesus, passionate about Jesus, but if the president says one thing, they're 100% on board. And, and I get it, because I was like that. I grew up, I think I said early on, my early 20s were in the 90s with the religious right and the moral majority, and I was right there, and that was me. Go, kingdom, heaven on earth, and we can do this. And so I understand. But
it's just strange how it got politicized. It's like, and maybe it just shows how deeply tribalistic and polarized we are, that things like wearing a mask can be like a partisan issue.
Right.
So, it's just weird to me. It's like,
yes. And people, here's the thing that just doesn't make sense, is that the same people that won't wear masks, if they went into a hospital room with immunocompromised cancer patients, so say, someone had a cancer patient, they say, "Hey, can you wear this mask to protect my kid?" They'd be like, "Oh, of course." Would they ever make that stand to say no? Or would they ever, if a surgeon was doing surgery and the guy said, "Hey," surgeon was going to do open heart surgery, had a little cold, and they're like, "You know what? Just so you know, I'm not going to wear my surgical mask today when I do surgery on you." Just some Christian belief that I have, and your risk is low, and it's only going to reduce the exposure. It's not going to eliminate it. Like, you'd be like, "What?" That Christian would be like, "No, put a mask on, even if it helps a little bit." So it's just, or if someone was doing your teeth and they were breathing all over you, you're a dental hygienist, and coughing, you'd be like, "Wait a minute, what's going on?" And
put on your stupid mask. Yeah, I've had pastors tell me they've had people leave their church because they've required masks. Several families have left church. I mean, I could think of several. I won't name them, or even and one person I think even said that it's the mark of the beast, the mask. Just, I mean, like there's weirdness in Christianity. There's weirdness in any religion. There's weirdness among atheists. So, I mean, you're always going to get.
No, that's fair. No, you're right.
But it's just it's a lot more weirdness than I'm comfortable with in the church. But what are your thoughts on? Do you think, and maybe you might punt and say this isn't in your area, but I mean, do you think churches should obey governing authorities when, like in California, they're told not to gather indoors, large gatherings, more than 10 indoors, which means church gatherings, or and especially don't sing because you're just spreading that all around.
I will use, one of the best or the most common answers in biosafety is it depends. We always say, well, it depends. It depends on like engineering controls, administrative controls. It depends on how the pathogen is transmitted. So I would say the same thing with church. It depends. I think there is a time. I don't think it's a black and white issue where, hey, the government's saying you can't worship. Maybe they're just saying you need to change a little bit, go outside or reduce the size or go 6 feet or. So I would think that they're case by case that, hey, if God's really, telling somebody, it's kind of the thing of conscience, right? I think you had a really good blog years ago. I don't know, about conscious that really kind of spoke to me that, and it's just like an individual might have, it's okay to drink beer or not drink beer, have a gun or not have a gun, or, I think that this could be really a situation as long as you, so another thing that we use in biosafety is we have institutional biosafety committees. So we have committees where we have all these, it's kind of like an elder board, right? You have all these different gifts and views and not silo at all. So everybody thinks differently, and it's really refreshing to be challenged, and not in a way where you take it personally, like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So I think if you have that in your leadership, where you have people that aren't, they're not afraid, or they're, of either the board or the leadership, but you really have a freedom, boy, you've really created a fantastic culture and leadership, and you can really have a good discussion. Hey, what's the pros? What's the cons? How many elderly people, how many young people do we have? Do we have a lot of immunocompromised? Do we reach out to, long-term care facilities, right? So it all, where are you at? Can you go outside? Are you going to be in Chicago? So, so it depends.
Well, talk to us about vaccines. Do we have a vaccine in the works that's promising? When will it be out? Will that send us back to normal? Could we get back to normal before the vaccine? I know these are all big questions.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So I think this is just my opinion because I work with vaccine research, right? So this is what we do at my laboratory, along with trying, therapeutics and stuff like therapies. But I don't know, because you can have something that's really so there's different phases. I work in the really initial phases where it's kind of exploratory, right? Okay. Where we're doing stuff in the lab, and then we do stuff with animals and stuff like that. So, and then once we see it, then it really kicks into the different phases where you do human trials, volunteer, stuff like that. So I don't really see that. I really see the early stages, But so I read a lot of stuff from, different studies and how safe they are, how effective they are. I just actually heard that Russia has one. I don't know, but what I don't think is I don't think it's going to be like a measles where it's like 90% one shot and we're good to go.
Okay.
I think that this is endemic, which means it's pretty much here to stay, like the flu, where it becomes seasonal to different degrees. It's possible they might need to tweak the vaccine every year. You might need multiple doses, but I don't think, I think it's more likely than not that it's gonna help.
Okay.
But I don't think it's gonna be like this one size fits all. Take a shot and we're gonna eradicate it. It's possible, but I don't think that's likely.
When do you see it coming out? When is it gonna be available to the public?
Yeah, so I think because they're going to have to go. I'm just kind of going through my mind the time frame of different phases. I know they've started different phases with different vaccines, but you have to do a huge proof of principle to do it safe. I'd be very shocked. So this is why I love the separation of powers. I don't want politics, driving this because, just for safety or efficacy, I want it done right. So probably next year, Preston, hopeful. It's possible, I guess it could be late this year. But I would hope that they don't do something unless it's has a good efficacy, right? So if it's like 20, if it's safe, but it affects 10% of the people, I would hope that they would look for something better that's effective and obviously safe.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's still $1 million question. It's possible that we might not see anything.
Really?
And we have to do a herd immunity thing where it's just this tinder of fire for 2 years and 3. I mean, it's just
And what about where are we at with if you've gotten it? Can you get it again? And if you get it again, are you at risk for dying? Or once you get it, are you good to go? Or
so the question is, do you have antibodies and for how long? So when you get a disease, when you get an illness, your body has an immune response. You get antibodies that will fight it so you don't get it again. So I think more likely is that, you do get antibodies, and they're good for months, not years.
Oh.
Here's kind of the negative thing of being asymptomatic. So what they're thinking is, obviously, if you have a severe illness, a lot of symptoms, that means your viral load is pretty high, right? So you really need some antibodies to have an immune response for your body. The problem is when you're asymptomatic, and 40% of people are asymptomatic, so you don't have a lot of virus in your body, so you don't need a lot of antibody, you don't need a huge immune response. So you wonder what those people, because it's new, we don't have a lot of numbers, you're wondering if people can get it every 6 months, every year, because they, had like a slight cold or a slight headache. And so those are the things that, this is what I really appreciate about Fauci, is that, and I know Fauci is a trigger word like masks, but I really appreciate with something like this, where you have to be slow and methodical, and you have to take all these different factors in, like, okay, it's good that 40% asymptomatic, but what does that mean for immune response? What happens if it comes back more severe? Stuff like that. So, that's what antibody response, what that looks like.
So if you got it and you're asymptomatic, then that would have, are you saying that would have less of a, like, you can get it again more easily?
Yeah,
versus
it's
if you've
possible.
had a strong
I don't want to
response?
speak in absolutes, but it's possible. I would think just because the more virus you have, the more of an antibody, immune response you have. Now, that's not a blanket statement.
Yeah.
There's going to be some people, I've seen some studies with people's, their vaccine history that's actually helped them with their immune response. That doesn't mean that's a proof of principle, but that's just one study. So, so there's going to be a lot of factors.
But you said it doesn't make them immune for life. So even if somebody did get it, they have tons of symptoms, they get through it. You're saying a couple years later, 3, 4, 5 years later.
Yeah.
So this isn't going away. You're saying this is going to, I mean, flu is the flu. It's here every year, right? You're saying
there's a lot of research. So it's just like flu is here to stay. There's a lot of people, I think more people than not think that it might be just here to stay to different, kind of like flu season or spring season. It just goes up and down, up and down. It's, so it's not 100%. But
so if that's
possible.
true, we can't just lock down forever and die in our living rooms. Like, is it? Would you say? I know Sweden. I don't think they ever really closed down. They just said we're just gonna develop herd immunity. I think and I think they're doing pretty good. They've never closed schools and everything. Like, is that? Do you think that's what we should do? Like, say if it's here to stay, then
that's a good question. I don't know. I think because it's so prevalent in our society now, I think we have to start having some sort of controls. It can't just, obviously I don't think we're going to go to lockdown again, but so I don't think we could do that. I mean, I'm not an expert. Public health is not my expertise, but I don't think we could do that now, just because it's going to be, we're going into school season, and schools really, and children in general really haven't been exposed because they got let out in March. So I don't know what's going to happen with schools. My hope is that we're going to be okay, but we've never really, I think the hope was that the cases would be, in the hundreds, and then we'd start school. So we had that buffer, and I don't think we have the buffer now.
Do you are things, I know we had the, would you say we're in a second wave right now, or because we kind of flattened the curve early on that we're still kind of in a flat first wave?
I think
where are we at right now? Do you feel like the outbreak is way worse than you expected, or are you like, no, we're doing pretty good, or where are we at?
No, I thought that we would be, very plateaued low going into the fall. That was, I think if you remember the study that I talked about, I think there was 4 different, scenarios.
Yeah.
And all the scenarios, none of the scenarios had a first wave lasting this long. And that's a reflection of the United States and, 50 states, 50 different policies and procedures. And so, I think there's some places where, like, I think Chicago is starting to see some numbers so we would be considered like a second wave because we went up and down. But then then you remember, I think we talked in March, there was waves in Chicago, New York, but down south we really hadn't seen anything. And then Texas and Arizona, Florida got hit. That was really their first wave. So I think nationwide you're seeing some places start maybe second wave, other places are just seeing a first wave. So because I'm not a historian with pandemics, but every scenario I saw, I didn't see Second wave for Chicago, first wave for Texas and stuff like that. So it's
it also doesn't also have to do with we're testing a ton more people now, and the asymptomatic, like that first wave could have been a lot bigger because there was asymptomatic people not being counted, right? Like we don't know how many people.
Oh,
and so yeah. So what we're experiencing, so what I've heard people say, and I don't know if it's right or not, like even though like I look at Idaho, almost every state, it kind of did this, flattened a little bit, and then this huge like summer spike. But that we're not sure how big that first spike was in terms of how many people actually had it. That just I don't know.
Absolutely, for a lot of different reasons, because of asymptomatic, because of people, we didn't have the testing available. Right. So I saw CDC, the guy, I forgot, Reedfield or the guy from, he says, with that first wave, it was probably 10% of the actual number. Yeah. So, so we were probably at 90% where people either didn't go to the doctor, didn't have symptoms. And yeah, there is some truth. I know trumpets that all the time, that we test more than any other nation. And that's true. That's part of the equation. There's no doubt that by millions, I think, the United States is testing more. So that's why I think the positivity rate is a more accurate number. So what's the rate of every 100 people that you test? And I think that's what schools and states are looking for in regards to going forward, is, how many out of every 100.
Do you think we should go back to school? I know that's a hot topic, right?
Yeah. I've actually had a couple of people email me in regards to this conversation. What do you think about school? Yeah. So just personally, I have 2 college kids that are going back, and they're doing a hybrid, where they're going to do some classes. And my daughters are in nursing, so it's all very practical. They can't, learn how to take care of patients in the classroom. And then my son is in high school, and they have an option of going to school or e-learning, and we're sending them back, I think that's the right choice. I'm very comfortable with that.
Sending kids back to school.
It depends, on the area. So if I was like in Florida, some of these places in Miami, I'd be like, I don't know if this is a good idea. The positivity rate is so high, but I wonder what they're going to do, what are parents going to do when you have positive cases? Because it's going to happen, right? You're going to school. It's an incubator, right? Kids are all they have all these policies and procedures, but they're kids, they're 16-year-old kids. So they go into the bathroom and they do stupid stuff. And, so I don't know how you can police it, but I wonder what they're going to do when you have 10 cases in the school. Are you going to shut it down again? 5 cases, because you have parents on that spectrum too, that are like, we go to school no matter what. And then I'm not, one case, we're shutting it down. And so I think nobody knows if we're going to get through the year, if they're going to e-learn again, stuff like that. So I think their school districts are doing their best, Now,
the death rate, from what I've heard, I mean, and I know this has been said a lot, but if you look at the specific numbers, like the odds of you, if you're under 25 and don't have a health condition, the death rate's the same as a seasonal flu. Is that accurate? I've heard.
That's accurate. And the people that quote that the most are the people that don't believe the case number. So it's really an ironic thing.
Oh, really? Right? Okay.
The people that are saying this is, more kids die of, and they're right, more kids die of flu and pneumonia, and more kids, the mental health, absolutely. But they're cherry picking a study. They'll be like, yes, look at this with the kid, which they're right. But then they'll say the infection rate, or they're the same people in general, not everybody in general, that are saying this is made up or the numbers aren't that big. So it's like, wait, you can't have it both ways. Yeah. You can't say you don't believe any of the studies, but here's a study from the CDC that says that kids have a bigger risk of dying of flu. So that's just my
but so the risk,
absolutely,
the concern, because I've heard some people say, if somebody typically on the right says we're going back to school, then they get accused of like, well, you just want to murder children in the classroom. It's like that it's not really the kids are at risk, right? It would be more them bringing it home and hanging out with the grandma or the teachers that might be older, have more health conditions. Like I can understand that, but I don't, the accusation that you don't care about our children, that seems like, well, we don't shut down the schools every year during the flu season. I mean,
yeah, they don't in general. There are some, if you have bad outbreaks, they'll say, hey, we're going to give it 2 weeks, whatever the incubation period for flu, maybe a week or something like that. So, So, but that's very isolated, very rare. Right. All the numbers that we have now are that kids are going to be okay. What that's going to look like for the teachers, I don't know, but I think in general to be okay. But I think I have an angst against the parents that go to, even locally, where they went to the school district and said, kids can't transmit the disease, and they'll say it like it's gospel and they're the experts. And I'm like, they just told 5,000 people like they were a doctor that it can't be transmitted. So that's what, I don't like. And so, yeah, but just to answer your question, I think with kids, they're going to be okay. Although we've never had them in school at this. There's been little pockets where they've been okay. But boy, so I don't think I would be 100% shocked if there were big outbreaks with kids. A lot of kids got it, because I don't know if every school is going mask or distancing like we are up here. But it'll be interesting to see, what that looks like, because we've never had the numbers of kids being together like we have. We've had pockets at camp, 100 kids going away, 30 of them got it. We have had camps, nobody got it. We've had daycares, nobody's got it. So it's all over. So
yeah, I did hear somebody say that like there's some studies show that kids, they don't even transmit it at a high percentage to adults. That didn't make sense to me. Like, why wouldn't, if they have it, and they. Is that something that people say, or is there any studies that back that up?
So there's a few studies that say as much, right? But then someone takes it on Facebook and says kids can't transmit it, which is just garbage. There was a study actually from a church where one person, a 57-year-old guy, got it, and 100 people in the church got infected. And so they kind of had a circle. He was in the middle, and then there was about 30 people that he directly infected, and then those people infected other people. And there was probably about 6 or 7 from 12 to 18 that were primary, and then they transmitted it to their family. So yeah, so that is as much as possible, but we're going to see. I mean, it's not settled science of what happens with kids. What we do know is that the kids, if they get it, their symptoms are in general, by large, much more minor symptoms, even asymptomatic. If you see all the athletes, not all the athletes, but that generation, 20 to higher teens to 30s, they get it. They're asymptomatic. If they're truly asymptomatic, I don't know. I think if someone would just had like sniffles or a headache, that really is a symptom. But I think if I had the sniffles, I would say, "Oh, I'm asymptomatic." Or if I just had a headache, I'd be like, "Oh, I'm asymptomatic."
The sniffles just makes it sound. I have the sniffles.
I know. So,
well, John, thanks so much.
Anyways, I'd be interested.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take much more of your time. I'm sure you got bigger problems to solve in the world. But thanks so much for.
Let me just say one funny story. I always get people when I hear them on Facebook, or they'll tell me, something about masks or vaccine. I'm like, hey, that's really good. I need to. Or I had some people, family members, that say, I believe about 90% of what you say, John. And I'll say, oh, well, give that to me, because I'm training people every day all over the United States. So give me that information so I can update what I'm training people. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, man. It's so refreshing to know that I have somebody I could talk to get some actual informed perspectives on things. So, and I love how you're if you were hyper partisan, I would be nervous, because I do think it's been so politicized that, as you said, there is a confirmation bias, and we all have confirmation bias. But I think the more allegiance you have to a particular political party, given how politicized this has become, it's gonna put lenses on. I love that. I don't feel like you're driven by that at all. So
yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, let's do it again in a couple months. Let's see.
All right, every couple months we'll check in. All right, take care, John.
God bless. Take care.